congratulations again
Thank you.
for becoming a fellow. I know that it took a lot of work on your part to make sure that the funding happened. And so it's not just a passive thing. You have to demonstrate to the Unreasonable Institute that you have the kahunas to make it.
You have to kick it pretty hard in order to kind of, in essence, you're going out. It's a crowdsourced finance model. That's
Right.
really what they're proving. And so for us, it was really interesting. Could we convince a whole swath of people around the world? In our case, I think it wound up being 140 different people that contributed to our race, using a 1-minute video and not a lot of text, that what you're doing is a change the world idea that they want to write a check for, right? And in our case, we're a business. We're a social venture business.
Right.
And so it was sort of fascinating to me that people got what we were doing so much and they wanted to touch and be part of it so intensely that they contributed their time, their attention, and their money in order to make it happen.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So I want to go back to my thing about no tradition, and it's very exciting that you're kind of rebuilding that sense of the importance of the tradition in the First Nations communities, or contributing to that. I know that a lot of their initiatives are about that, reclaiming their heritage, reclaiming their traditions, reclaiming their traditional chiefs, so that they can recapture a sense of dignity as to who they are. But what about us non-Aboriginals, us white folks that have kind of trashed the planet and decided that nothing matters, place isn't a thing that we care about, it's just, a reason that we put a piece of pavement down to get us from A to B. Is there a hope for us with your model?
I think so, and I think part of what's been really interesting for me is when I first started working so intensely with First Nations communities, people kept talking about listening to the ancestors, and when you spend time with a lot of First Nations elders, they'll talk about how much they listen to the elders, how much they strive to hear the ancestors. And at first I sort of struggled with, what are they hearing? Where are they hearing this from? And then I realized, well, maybe it's easier to hear whatever it is they're hearing when you know where the bones of your ancestors are buried, and you know that literally the trees in that forest are made of the bodies of your family over thousands of years. Maybe that's what it takes to hear. And then I realized that I start now to hear ancestors. I hear the cultural resonance of my various collections of people, because I'm taking the time to listen. I particularly been looking at the sort of Scottish ancestry in my family, and ancient Scots and even contemporary Scots that are rediscovering their culture talk about listening to the ancestors. They talk about honoring the traditions of their people over a millennium, just like First Nations. And then I realized it's true of all Indigenous cultures, that everyone all over the planet right now is struggling with that sense of, how do we live as modern people with our new appreciation for literacy, our new appreciations for democracy, our new appreciations for maybe we shouldn't kill every whale on the planet, regardless of whether we did culturally, right? That we have these new realities that don't include slavery, right? Which are really good advancements, which I'm very happy about, frankly.
Yeah.
And how do we hold that tension of also remembering that we in ourselves have, in every single one of us, the knowledge of how to live without trashing the place. We do. We all have it, from every culture, from every tradition. And so there's something for me about the gift of working with these communities, and the gift of hearing the stories of elders that hold that reservoir of culture and tradition that says, don't take more than you need. Respect the other creatures. The body of this particular body of water is just like my body and my mother's body, so I'm not going to harm it or pollute it. Those ancient cultural teachings, they're in every single one of our cultural traditions. Just like the golden rule shows up in every single religious tradition.
Yep.
And it's time we stopped and paid attention to those fundamental principles of do not take more than you need, and live in a respectful way with the living world. There's a sacredness that exists in many, many different cultural traditions that we can all touch if we just figure out how to do it in our own way.
Yeah, I'm reminded I took a body-mind centering training program at one point in time, and we really focused in at that cellular level and our connections to our mothers before us through generations past. And it strikes me then that we're not educating our young people or even our old people about those connections, about that sense of responsibility that comes through the traditions of our ancestors, which often when I heard a very moving First Nations fellow who was talking about our children 100 years not born, and they go back an equal number of years in their connections to their ancestors, so they're connected both ways. And it seems to me that it has pretty profound implications for how we go about educating the people of BC if we're really going to make that fundamental shift.
And that idea of moving forward and responsibility forward, I think, is really essential, because the concept of intergenerational equity is sort of what pulled me so strongly into the sustainability work. And the idea that we naively think sustainability is the idea of doing something in perpetuity. It isn't. It's actually, sustainability at its core is about not taking more today than future generations could take or have or make a world of. And so that idea of creating equity, justice for people that aren't even born yet is absolutely essential. It needs to be part of who we are in this particular context, and our policies need to reflect it. Our economic policies, our tax policies, the businesses we incentivize, the businesses we give subsidies to, that entire framework needs to be in alignment with everything we've ever known as a species and everything we want to leave for the future.
Yeah, which is Green Party policy, just all in a nutshell. And it's what drives me. I mean, politics is not all that rewarding on some levels, but it is an important place to bring reform and change ideas, and a necessary place if we're going to work together to find a solution and survive. And for me, the thing that really motivated me was grandkids, because when you realize that when my grandkids are having grandkids and we're leaving them a pretty impoverished place, it's a big sense of responsibility that you can't not take an opportunity to try and make a difference and to try and make change. I want to talk a bit about the value of economic development. You're a person that believes in market solutions. You believe in economic development. What do you think that brings to a community? What will it bring to the First Nations that you work with around the globe? How important is it as part of the model?
I think it's absolutely foundational. And for me, good economies are built on food security and energy security. If you do not know where your food is coming from and you don't have heat, light, and power, good luck building any kind of economy. So for me, it starts there: food security, energy security. Yeah. Then you have the platforms. You have well-fed, well-nourished people that have local sustainability, and they've got all of the largesse and infrastructure that they need to start building out some kind of an economy. And from there, the economy needs to be built again on the foundation of who are you, what do you care about, and where do you want to go? Not the idea that economic development is any big turnover, fast, high throughput, completely valueless form of cash infusion, which for me is the misdirection of economic development, and the thing that made me so cynical about ActDev for years and years and years when I was an activist. I just felt like, well, great, so there's a casino. Well, great, there's a strip mall. Excellent, there's a gas bar. Yay, economic development. And it just made me really, really cynical. And then I realized, well, that's just a type of economic development. There's dollars and there's jobs. And so if you know who you are, if your foundation is firm and you know what your values are, then you choose different dollars and you choose different jobs. And if they resonate and align with your beliefs and your culture and everything you've been and everything you want to be, there is a completely different, more powerful form of economy. And money is energy. Right? We can be cynical about money. We can be cynical about what an economy is and does. And I know people that are very cynical about the market and the market is bad. For me, it's neutral. For me, those containers, money, economies, they're neutral. And it's about bringing different values into those spaces. So the idea of helping communities stand where they are, be whole as humans and as circles and communities, and then make powerful decisions about how they move forward and how they build jobs and how they build economies, it's thrilling. And we're starting to see just amazing little things happen in the communities that we are working with. There's an empowerment. And I think it's not an accident that the word power means power, that energy also means energy. There's this robustness to those spaces that actually can energize and empower people in ways that I didn't even really imagine, that I actually probably haven't even seen the fullness of. But there's a lift, to a community, building a wind tower and then thinking, how are we going to mark that and make it look like a totem pole? Or put up a solar panel and mark it with a Coast Salish logo so that it feels like it's part of their culture. And there's countless opportunities, I think, to have art and culture show up in energy projects in ways that they haven't traditionally, that also gives communities a sense of putting their hands on the technology. So if they know how to operate it and they own it themselves and they're a part of the design of it, and then literally the artists in those communities change and touch the technology so that it feels like it comes from them, it's a completely different sort of energy project.